Salutations! To kick off this video, I have a few questions. Have you ever noticed an intrusive idea suddenly cut off your train of thought, as if appearing from nowhere? Do the images in your mind sometimes run wildly out of your conscious control? Have you ever felt a great wave of ideas wash over you in an instant without invitation, only to be incapable of coming up with anything when you actually try, as if these things don't have an origin in your own mind? You do know what I'm talking about, right? So where do these little voices come from? The obvious immediate answer is that they are the result of neurons firing in your brain, but this isn't a biology video, and that doesn't really constitute a proper answer. We must keep in mind not only that natural phenomena are the powers of daimonia, but also that all patterns that exist in matter are not from the matter itself, but from the forms. The arrangement of the neurons in your brain participates in patterns that have an independent and purely mathematical existence. Therefore, it is not surprising in the least that much of what the vehemently wise would call random thoughts should actually contain information descending from above, so to speak. That doesn't mean they are not formed out of neuron activity. The two positions are not mutually exclusive, in fact they depend on one another. Because what we are describing is a receptive faculty like the senses, it follows that some people are more sensitive than others. Among other things, this is one of the origins of our notions of psychics, oracles, and prophets.
Lobsters are psychic.
And just like with the senses, it is easier to receive impressions from outside when we switch off all the noise inside, just as Agrippa says here. But these kinds of descents, or senses, come not into our souls when they are more attentively busied about anything else, but they pass into them when they are vacant. Now, there are three kinds of this vacancy, viz. Frenzy, ecstasy, and dreams, of each of which in their order. What is intended by dreams is fairly obvious, but what does Agrippa mean by frenzy and ecstasy? He's referring to what we call altered states of consciousness, in which our awareness is shifted and we experience the world differently.
I'm insane!
This is associated with certain mental illnesses, but it can also be induced intentionally in a controlled way through things like hypnosis, meditation, or psychoactive drugs.
Where's my hair?
Finno-Ugric and Turco-Mongolic shamans use chanting and the rhythmic beating of a drum to pull themselves into a trance in which their normal awareness falls into the background, allowing them to communicate with spirits or even send their own spirits out of their bodies. Germanic tribal warriors used to work themselves into a raging frenzy of screaming, growling, and biting that the Romans called Furor Teutonicus, or German fury, and the Vikings called Berserkergang, or going berserk, during which they were apparently possessed by spirits and not only became immune to pain and fear, but also grew stronger.
Wochenende, weißt du?
The Delphic Pythia supposedly inhaled gases which put her into a stupor, upon which she was possessed by the oracular daimon of Apollo and spoke prophecies. Every single one of her recorded prophecies later came true. The attendants of the Eleusinian mysteries drank Kykeon laced with a psychedelic fungus, and in doing so saw through the actors to the immaterial powers they embodied in the ritual performance. I will leave a link in the description to a video that expounds on the Kykeon. And of course we can't forget the charismatic Christians who go into fits and start speaking in tongues when their Holy Spirit descends upon them. All of these are examples of the conscious mind relinquishing control and allowing other influences to direct them.
I am the liquor.
Plato talks about this through Socrates in his dialogue Phaedrus. If madness was simply an evil, it would be right. But in fact, some of our greatest blessings come from madness, when it is granted to us as a divine gift. For instance, the prophetess at Delphi and the priestesses at Dodona have done Greece a lot of good, not only individuals but whole communities in their madness, but little or nothing when they were in their right minds. And if we are to mention Sibyl and the others who, when possessed by a god, use prophecy to predict the future and have on numerous occasions pointed people in the right direction, we would only be lengthening our account with information that is already completely familiar. Because of this association with oracles, Agrippa refers to this process as soothsaying.
Okay, let's predict some crap.
He distinguishes several types, each of which he associates with a Greek deity. Soothsaying is that which the priests or others were stricken withal, and discerned the causes of things, and foresaw future things, viz. When oracles and spirits descended from the gods, or from demons upon them, and are delivered by them, which descending the Platonists call the falling down of superior souls upon our souls, and Mercurius calls them the senses of the demons, by which Agrippa means daimons, and the spirits of demons. Now there are 4 kinds of divine frenzy proceeding from several deities, viz. From the Muses, from Dionysus, from Apollo, and from Venus. The frenzies attributed to the Muses and to Venus are very important in Platonism, and we will be exploring them in future videos. For now we will cover those of Dionysus and Apollo. Dionysus, or Bacchus, is a god of alcohol, fruit, festivals, liberation and fertility. He is also a god of rebirth, who is associated with a death and resurrection in the Dionysian mysteries, the Eleusinian mysteries, and the Orphic mysteries. Unlike Apollo and Venus, Dionysus does not have a celestial body attributed to him.
The clue for 7 down is celestial body, and he wrote Uma Thurman.
Yes.
His power is set about the world immediately around us, immanent in the life cycles of the plants that represent him and more broadly in all bodies. In Phaedrus, Plato calls the madness of Dionysus initiatory, an obvious reference to these several mystery traditions in which Dionysus plays a role. The purpose of these mystery cults was to alter the way the initiates think. Participants reported life-changing, visionary experiences, and claimed that those who had been initiated were transformed into a more blessed state that would last even through death, according to Agrippa. This does, by expiations exterior and interior, and by conjurations, by mysteries, by solemnities, rites, temples, and observations, divert the soul into the mind, the supreme part of itself, and makes it a fit and pure temple of the gods. It is by means of this state that Socrates could hear the voice of his guardian daimon, which prevented him from taking certain harmful actions. A likely continuation of this initiatory tradition can be found in the Picatrix, which contains an initiatory ritual by which the operator may begin to see and hear his own perfect nature as a guiding spirit. I've left a link in the description to a recitation of that part of the book. This may also be connected to the Fura Teutonicus of the Germanic world, but it is also possible that that belongs to the next category, attributed to Apollo. Alongside Mercury, Apollo is considered to be a messenger, who delivers foresight and the edicts of Jove to mankind through oracles. The Delphic Pythia served as the voice for Apollo, and in Plato's Republic, Socrates suggests that the perfect city that the speakers are imagining should defer to her about all matters relating to religion. Agrippa says, "This does by certain sacred mysteries, vows, sacrifices, adorations, invocations, and certain sacred arts, or certain secret confections, by which the spirits of their god did infuse virtue, make the soul rise above the mind, by joining it with deities and demons." By secret confections, he is probably referring to some kind of psychoactive preparation comparable to the Kykeon, which would put the consumer into a trance and allow them to receive the impressions of the deity more easily. The human priest being seized or possessed by a deity is common in folk religion even today in the modern world. It is a normal component of voodoo among the African diaspora, who refer to it as being ridden by the loa or spirit.
We need to start voodoo rituals with monkeys so that we can please ourselves.
In Nepal, the Hindus and Buddhists venerate Kumaris, human hosts that serve as embodiments for the goddess. This reminds us of one of the old May Day traditions in England, the enthronement of the May Queen. As May Day was originally the culmination of the festivities in honour of the English goddess Aestra, it seems likely that in heathen times the May Queen had the same function as a Kumari. Here is a more detailed example. For 9 months in the year, Hari Das is a manual labourer and prison guard. In the remaining 3 months, he is the medium of a Hindu god. You become the deity. You lose all fear. Even your voice changes. The god comes alive and takes over. You are just the vehicle, the medium. In the trance, it is the god who speaks, and all the acts are the acts of the god. Feeling, thinking, speaking. The interpretation easier for modern Western common sense is that this is simply a form of theatre, which we take for granted, but this is not how it seems to the participants. There may be moments even in the modern theatre when a great actor does manage to incarnate a spirit, But the participants in such rituals do not consider themselves great actors, nor do they remember any details of what they do while possessed, a feature not mentioned for the classical pantomime. Nor do they suppose merely that the gods are their own hidden selves, as though Haridas's evocation of the god Vishnu were invoking only Haridas's Vishnu. It is thought to be possible instead for someone else to take on the role, the god, when Haridas has to retire. Of course, there is also a flip side to this. Surrendering oneself to external influences without the proper ritual context opens the door for all kinds of malevolent forces, kakadaimons, which will inflict serious psychological harm on the one receiving them, and also use their body against those around them.
The demons taught me to.
This is why constant openness to interference constitutes a mental illness and not a blessing. Needless to say, this channel does not support the habitual or continuous recreational use of psychedelic drugs. Finally, let's take a look at what Agrippa refers to as ecstasy. The cause of this is in us a continual contemplation of sublime things, which as far as it conjoins with the most profound intention of the mind, the soul to incorporeal wisdom, so far recalls itself with its vehement agitations from things sensible to the body, and, as Plato says, in such a manner sometimes that it even flies out of the body, and seems as it were dissolved, even as Aurelius Austin reports concerning a priest of Calamia, of whom we have made mention before. He lay, says he, most like unto a dead man, without breath, and when he was burnt with fire and wounded, he felt it not. Also we read in Herodotus that there was in Proconnesus a philosopher of wonderful knowledge, called Atheus, whose soul sometimes went out of his body, and after the visitation of places far remote, returned again into the body more learned. Pliny reports the same thing, that the soul of Harman Clazomenius was wont to wander abroad, his body being left, and to bring true tidings of things very far off, and that there are even to this day in Norway and Lapland very many who can abstract themselves 3 whole days from their body. Any viewer with a passing interest in the paranormal will know that this sort of experience is extremely common and goes by many names. Iamblichus, Porphyry, and Proclus all make references to the Algoides Okema, or stellar vehicle, as opposed to the physical vehicle, which can move independently. Iamblichus holds that this vehicle belongs to the sphere of daimonia, and that it is not made of any kind of matter that is known to us, nor does it come from the elements, but it is formed by the aether. The latter part of the previous quote is a reference to the Sami shamans mentioned earlier. There are also plenty of accounts from Europe of people sending out their spirits as fetches while leaving their bodies in a sort of coma. The saga of Olaf Tryggvason states that Harald Bluetooth told a sorcerer to scout out Iceland in preparation for an invasion. This sorcerer sent out his spirit in the form of a whale, but was attacked by the nature spirits of Iceland, including a dragon, so Harald called off the invasion. According to an Irish source, the men of a certain lineage were able to send their spirits out of their bodies in the shape of wolves. As we've discussed before in this series, several scientific institutions, including SRI International, have conducted thousands of cumulative experimental trials that serve to demonstrate beyond any reasonable doubt that this is a real phenomenon.
Is it true?
In case you missed that before, I've left links in the description to some experimental reports showing these results. In the next video, we'll talk about the frenzy attributed to the Muses, also known as the Furor Poeticus. Thanks for watching and have a nice day.
Subscribe.
Thank you very much. That was my way. You're telling y'all to subscribe.